He's about 455 yards away. He's going to hit about a 2 iron, I think.
This is the School of Motion podcast. Come for the MoGraph, stay for the puns.
That's why I think it's good to think about these things of like, I'm running a business. This is my business. It's not a personal thing. Like, it's personal in the way that I'm always going to do the best for my clients. You know, I'm doing this because I want to be an animator and I want to survive being an animator and I don't want to be a starving artist. This is what I have to charge to do that.
I doubt there are many artists in the industry that took up motion design to deal with contracts and cancellation clauses and accounting practices. I mean, maybe there are a few, but you get what I'm saying. But as unappealing as these topics can be, they are, of course, very important. When you get into this industry, and especially if you ever freelance, you really do need to learn the business side of motion design. Fortunately for you, my guest today has made this process much less painful. Hayley Akins is on the podcast today, and she is the founder of Motion Hatch, a very cool online community that focuses solely on the business side of things. She's the host of the wonderful Motion Hatch podcast and has recently released a freelance contract bundle that you can check out at motionhatch.com. Hayley has a pretty interesting story when it comes to how she found herself in the industry, and it's another example of the strange convergence of events and influences that can lead a person in a direction they never imagined they'd go. If you're curious about the business of motion design, if you're already part of the Motion Hatch community, or if you're curious to learn about the person behind this amazing new site, you are going to love Hayley. Let's do it. All right, Hayley, it's awesome to finally get you on the School of Motion podcast. Thank you for your time, and I have so many questions for you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show.
Well, you know, I've been wanting to have you on ever since I heard about Motion Hatch and got to meet you, and I'm glad we finally got the opportunity. So, you know, I first found out about you because you reached out, you started Motion Hatch, which for anyone listening that's not familiar, is this amazing website and podcast and community, and now even products that are really focused on the business side of motion design, which that holds a very dear place in my heart, obviously. But I know that before that, you know, for years you've been doing client work, and I think you still do client work. So I was wondering if you could tell us, you know, a little bit of your background. How did you get into the motion design industry?
Yeah, sure. Well, I didn't really know that I wanted to be a motion designer or an animator. You know, you kind of hear about all these people. They're like, yeah, when I was younger, I was watching like Nickelodeon and I really wanted to be an animator. That wasn't really my experience. When I was at school, I kind of struggled a little bit because I was dyslexic and kind of ended up in a lot of like the lower set classes because I wasn't very academic, but then was kind of very creative and just wanted to do creative things and mainly wanted to be in a band and stuff like that. I always interview people on my podcast and they're always like, yeah, it's because I wanted to be in a band and then somehow I became a motion designer. And
I get it, yep.
Kind of the similar story here. So yes, I wasn't very academic, but I kind of loved learning and being creative, and I really wanted to go to university, which is like, you know, what you do from when you're sort of 18. I'm aware it's like a US audience, so I'm trying to, you know,
Thank you
for
translating.
Yeah, so I wanted to go to university, but, you know, I was kind of not really academic. And there was this one like story my dad told me recently, which I thought was kind of sad, but kind of interesting, is that we went to the careers office. You know, you kind of have like a careers advisor or something at school. And we went in there and we sat down and I was like, hey, yeah, I want to go to university. And I was the first person in my family like to get the opportunity. And they were like, oh, well, like maybe you could work in your dad's bakery or something like that. And like, I don't really remember this, but he was like really upset about that because I think like, obviously this was years and years ago, and I'm sure the education system has got a lot better in the UK now, but they just didn't like think that I could do that. I guess they were sort of thinking that maybe I would do something academic at university, so then I wouldn't be able to hack it or whatever. So yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up because it was kind of like, I just really wanted to carry on education and really wanted to carry on learning. So anyway, I pushed through it and I went to do A-levels, which is between the age of like 16 and 18. And I did psychology, philosophy, and religious studies, which I know is crazy. Yeah, it's a really weird thing to do. But basically it's because when I was a kid, I used to go to these Buddhist festivals with my dad. And I was just really interested in like religion and just learning about different things, and like I guess just interested in people in a way and what makes them tick. So I did that kind of for a couple of years, but I really wanted to be in bands. So I was in a few bands, and then I met someone who was a little bit older than me who went to Staffordshire University and did like a film production and music technology course. And I thought, oh, okay, if I go and do like music tech, then I can, be in a band basically and be creative, which is kind of what I always wanted to do. So yeah, that was the only university I went to visit as well, which was Staffordshire. So it's like lucky that I got in, really, because I didn't really give myself any other option. I was just like, nope, I'm going to do film production and music tech. And all the other options I chose were like philosophy. So yeah, I'm really, really glad that I didn't end up doing philosophy, because that would have been very bad, because I'd just be writing essays all the time, and I'm really rubbish at that. So
just thinking and pondering a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I found it really interesting. It was a great subject, but yeah, I wouldn't be here speaking to you right now if I did that. So that would
your life would have turned out awful, Hayley, clearly.
No, but I would have been. I have no idea what I would have been doing. But anyway.
Hey, wait, let me stop you for a second, because I want to dig into this a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So my wife is dyslexic, and had a horrible experience coming up through school. The U.S., in the 80s, when she was really young, had really no help for dyslexic students, and it was really not well understood. But then later on, and now we have children, and we see a lot of those signs in our children. Like we haven't gotten them tested or anything, but like there's a good chance they would be diagnosed as dyslexic, at least our oldest. But what's interesting is that, to me, what it seems like is people who are dyslexic, they sort of process information differently, which has downsides. It makes it harder to decode letters, and there's sort of the typical things of it's harder to learn to read and things like that. But then it creates these interesting connections. And I have an 8-year-old daughter who comes up with the most creative, weird thoughts. And it's almost like I don't know where they're coming from. And my wife says, that's exactly how I was when I was a kid. And I'm curious if that creativity and that attraction to music, and now obviously to motion design, to art, if you remember feeling that as a kid, even though like in school you were probably being told, you're a terrible student.
Yeah, I think it was really tough, because like I said, I was kind of put in like, they call them like the bottom sets. They probably don't call them the bottom sets now, right? But like when I was there, they were like, the bottom sets, like you kind of have like tiers of classes, what people are in. And, the people who do well get put with the other people who do well, and then the people who don't do as well get put in the lower kind of classes. And then you get a lot of other kids that are kind of messing around and stuff in there. And I found that really hard, because I really wanted to learn, and I really tried my best, like always, and I wanted to hang around with like the swotty kids. And then, but I got put with these other kids who didn't want to learn, and I always found that really tough.
Right.
And yeah, and I think it probably is that thing of, I just probably learned in a different way. And I did get quite a lot of extra help, which I was grateful for, kind of like extra time on exams and stuff like that. But I just wasn't like an exam kind of person, I can't do that. Like I do much better at kind of practical things. Like, I guess that's why motion design, stuff like that, and being in a band, because it just appeals to me. I just do better in those kind of things rather than like writing stuff down.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, another thing I wanted to ask you was, right now, in the US anyway, especially in public schools, arts and, creative arts and music and illustration, all those sorts of things, basically are gone. Like they just get stripped away and there's just no important placed on them. But for students like you and like my wife was, and like my daughter, would be, I mean, we homeschool, but if she went to school, she would definitely be in this category, are pulled more towards these creative arts. And I'm curious if when you were in school, if art and music were sort of, I don't know, second-class citizens, kind of the way that they are now in a lot of schools.
Yeah, I think they definitely were. And then I think one other thing that didn't really help me is when we sort of like chose what GCSEs we got to do, like what exams, what subjects. And my sister was like a really, really good artist. Like she's excellent. Like to this day, she's like really, really good. So I thought, oh, everyone who's going to be like the same age as me, because I'm older, they're going to be as good as my sister who's younger doing art, so I shouldn't do it. Which I think is ridiculous. I was like, why did I do that? It was so stupid, because I just thought, well, she's really good, so, and she's younger than me, so obviously I can't do art.
Might as well not even try, right?
Yeah, which is really ridiculous. I obviously never spoke to my parents or anything about that, because they probably would have said, no, everybody's probably rubbish. It's just, your sister's really good. But then another sweet thing that she said to me years later was, oh, that's because I used to copy off you when you were younger. And I was like, really? What? Like, yeah, it's
comes
just
full circle.
Yeah, it was just a crazy thing. But anyway, I feel like I don't think we had any music lessons kind of, at secondary school. But we definitely had like art was definitely an option. But now I hear there's like so many more options for people, which is great. But yeah, I think as well, on just talking about the business side of things, I think that needs to be focused on a lot more in school. I actually did a business GCSE, and it was the thing that I got the highest mark on when I left school, which I think is a little bit telling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was interesting. I just looked that up recently, and I was like, I got the highest grade on business studies.
So how did you end up, actually working at a studio? I mean, did you sort of like do the Andrew Kramer, route and teach yourself a little After Effects? How'd you get into it?
Yeah, so I said I went to Stafford University and did film production and music tech. Then I dropped to the music tech part because I thought, this isn't about being in a band at all. I don't want to do it. It's too techy. Right. So I just did film production. So I graduated with a degree in film production, and we did a lot of After Effects and Photoshop kind of modules, which really helps because it was much more practical than like a film studies degree. So then I just looked for jobs basically doing like being a runner, being an editor, anything. And it was mainly either my choices were move to London or move to Manchester at the time. I think now, there's a lot more different opportunities in the UK, but I mean, obviously it's still heavily London focused. So right. I just looked for different jobs, and I just happened to get a job as a junior graphics operator in a sports broadcasting company. And I really hate sport. But I was like, I'm not making the tea.
And that's a weird title too. So graphics operator. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's not a motion designer. It's basically working with this system called Clarity, where you're kind of plugging in stuff that you make in After Effects into this Clarity system, and it's like a live graphics system. It's like a bit of hardware, and I'm trying to remember from many years ago, so I hope this is right. But yeah, it's like a bit of hardware, and it kind of, so when they're doing like live football matches, things like that, you would cue the graphic, and then it would pull up like, the score like 1-0 to Chelsea or whatever. Gotcha. So it was like kind of live gallery sort of work. I didn't really like it. So that you
really were just a button pusher at that point.
Yeah. So basically just like queuing up the graphics and stuff like that, or like typing in over like some pre-made graphics someone had made, basically doing live football games. And you didn't get
to design or animate any of that stuff?
No, my first job I didn't get to design or animate, but then I really wanted to do that because just in my head I was like, okay, well, so I don't really like this. What's the most creative thing I can do in the building? And I was like, well, maybe I could make the graphics. That would be more creative. Like,
sure.
Actually doing the design side of it. So then I kind of got promoted to a junior motion designer. So I guess that's kind of the start of the journey in that company. And then because I had a heavily sports background, I really wanted to move out of sport, but I found it quite difficult because everyone would be like, well, you haven't done anything else. You've only done sports for like a few years. So then I went for another junior motion design role. And I looked online and I just found this company. They were called Across the Pond. And I was like, oh, they seem nice. They're like quite a small company. They looked quite new. And then I went for the interview and I rocked up at their office and there was like a big Google logo and it was in the Google office. And I was like, have I like come to the wrong place? Like, I didn't understand what was going on. But anyway, it turned out that Across the Pond were like the internal video production company at the time inside Google. So yeah, it was really interesting.
Good for them.
So, yeah, it was like, I was just shocked because they didn't have like really a site or anything. They were quite new at that time. And they basically kind of built themselves like out of Google. So the woman who started it, she started as a producer at Google and then she saw a need for video there and motion design, so she started up this company. So that's why they were quite new. So then I got that job there and then kind of worked my way up to senior motion designer.
So you said that when you left the sports graphics job, that it was hard for you to move into something that wasn't sports. Was that just because, on your reel and your portfolio, that's all you had?
Yeah, mainly. It was like, well, it was hard for me to kind of go into like, say like a middleweight job, I guess, because I didn't have like tons of experience that was outside of the sports arena.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, that's a pretty common problem in our industry, this whole idea of, clients and even, some studios, they want to hire you for what you have done, not what you might be able to do. And I'm just curious if you took any lessons away from that.
I think maybe don't stay at a company for years that you don't really want to be at and just push yourself to do something else. I think I was really young and I was kind of worried that like, oh, I can't go freelance. Oh, I can't do anything else. Like, this is all I know. I've got to just try and somehow find like another full-time job, right? I mean, who knows whether I would have got freelance jobs back then. I'm not really sure, but I guess it's like, just maybe having a bit more confidence to move sooner. So I didn't end up with like quite a lot of sports stuff on my reel, like maybe move somewhere else a bit earlier in my career or something like that would have helped.
That's really good advice, actually. So, okay, so you go from sports company and then you get this cool job in Google's office.
Yeah.
You move up to senior motion designer. And so then what made you decide to leave and go freelance?
Yeah, so I think it was like, I spent quite a few years there. I think I was there for about maybe 4.5 years. So up until then, I worked full time as a motion designer, like almost like 6 years. Like that's a lot longer than most people. And so I just felt like, I want to give freelancing a try. And also I was kind of running projects at Google, like as a senior motion designer, like running a group of freelancers on big Google projects and things like that. So I just felt like there isn't really like much of the things I can do here that I haven't already done. So I felt like I should do that. I think it took me like a long time. I think I was thinking about it probably for like half the time I was there, like maybe like 2 years or 1.5 years. That was that sitting there going, yeah, maybe I could be a freelancer. Like I think
working up the courage, right?
Yeah, I think loads of people listening to this are probably thinking that's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah. And so when you finally made the jump, what was that transition like for you?
Well, because I'd spent so much time thinking about it and also building up a lot of contacts. Because working full time, obviously, the good thing to do is like keep in touch with everyone, write stuff down, like have a spreadsheet. So I was pleased that I did that. And I was quite good at, staying friends with people when they left. And a lot of the time we had like a lot of freelance producers coming in and out and things like that. So that really helped because it was, it's all about like meeting people and networking and things like that, even though it's kind of like icky, but, it does help.
It's ick. It's not icky if you. So let me say something, Hayley. One of the things that we always tell people, and obviously, like I talk about freelancing a lot. The most important thing I think in terms of being a successful freelancer, it's not being this like kick-ass rock star motion designer. It's just being someone that your clients would like to be around, because, whether you're doing it remote or if you're going to their office or whatever, you're communicating a lot with your clients, and you are just sort of naturally, I think, a very likable person. And so I'm sure that helped too. But I kind of wanted to call that out because I think some people who are thinking about going freelance, they don't realize just how important that piece is. Not just that you're likable, but that you're not, super shy and are willing to network, even if it makes you feel a little bit icky. I hope it doesn't make you feel too icky, because it is super important.
No, yeah, exactly. I think what you said is really right, because I was very aware that I wanted to go freelance, right? So for the last 2 years, say that I was there, I was like making sure that I was like staying friends with people and being good to work with, and generally being a nice person. And I would always kind of come from that mindset anyway, of like always try your best and things like that. So I think that really comes across. And yeah, like you say, people will be surprised how much work you can get from just being like a nice person to work with.
I know, it's kind of that simple sometimes. So I want to get into Motion Hatch, but before we get there, there was something I saw on your LinkedIn page that was kind of interesting. I wanted to ask you about. I think it was in the bio that you wrote about yourself. You said that you've spoken on the topic of, the importance of choosing projects wisely. And I think you said it sort of in the context of you want to work on projects that make the world a better place. And you've actually spoken about this. So I'm curious what you mean by that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's kind of that thing of trying to think about who your clients are and what kind of projects that you want to work on. And for me, I've always just felt like, I want to work with people who share my values, who generally are doing stuff that has a positive impact on the world. So like, it could be like stuff about like sustainable energy, things like that, like animation projects about that. Like that seems more worthwhile to me than say like, I don't know, doing an ad for Iceland or something. So right. Not to call out
an
Iceland,
oil company or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like what? Iceland isn't that bad. Yeah, like an oil company. That's a much better example, Joey.
I'm apologizing on behalf of Hayley to Iceland.
Yeah, everyone at Iceland's like, oh my God.
Oh my God. So like, have you said no to projects because they were for a product that it didn't align with your values?
Yeah, definitely. And I try and like actively seek out those clients now who I know that I'm like, oh yeah, I like what they're doing. I'm going to like shoot them an email and say, hey, I think it's really cool what you're working on. I'm really passionate about the subject too. Maybe we can just have a chat about it, that kind of thing. So yeah, I was talking about that. It was like a super short little speech, I guess, because it was for this festival called Reasons 2, and it was called the Elevator Pitch, and you had like, I think there was like 10 of us. It was like doing like speakers boot camp. It was the scariest thing ever. But yeah, it's scarier than doing like a 45-minute presentation, because you get on stage and then they're like, okay, you've got 3 minutes, speak about something. So I was like, okay, what am I going to speak about? Well, the most important thing to me is kind of using your design for good, right? So I'm going to try and speak about that. So I was just saying, like if you're struggling for stuff to think about, you could maybe look at B Corps, because I know in the UK, I think in the US too, they have like a certification that's called a B Corp. So basically B Corps are companies that are using the power of business to like have a positive impact on the world for change, stuff like that. They have to go through like a rigorous thing to get this certification. So I was saying like maybe you could use that as like a place to search for clients, just trying to think outside the box of where to look for clients, and not just being like, oh yeah, I'll just do work on anything because, I'll just take anything I can get, really.
Right. It's really, I think it's a great message, and it's great that you do that. I think what you were calling a B Corp, I assume, is a nonprofit in the US, a company that basically, they don't have to pay taxes on corporate profits, which most charities are set up that way for that reason. But what you're saying, it reminds me a lot of things I've heard Erica Gorochow say. She spoke at the Blend conference a year and a half ago, and basically, had said, motion design is a superpower. It's like you have this persuasive tool set with using visuals and audio and conceptual meaning and visual language, and you can like deploy that on behalf of a client to help convince their customers to do something. And so you can use that to get, to help Walmart sell, a few more diapers, or you can use it to help get people out to vote, which, so it's really cool to hear you do that. Sonder Van Dyke also has talked about this. And I think it's something that as motion design becomes more prevalent and, our industry especially artists in our industry start to realize the power that you wield, I think it's important to think about. And I'm glad that you talk about it publicly. That's really cool. So now let's talk about the newest thing that you've hatched. See what I did there? See how I did that? So what was so obviously anyone listening, we're going to have links to everything in the show notes, but definitely check out Motion Hatch. The Motion Hatch podcast is excellent. There's a Facebook community, but where did the motivation for this come from? Can you talk about sort of the genesis of Motion Hatch?
Yeah, I wanted to go back on the B Corp thing for a second.
Oh, sure.
Because,
let's.
Just because.
Just see myself out here.
No, just because. It's not the same as a non-profit. It's like it's like a certificate that you get when you're using your business to like usually solve social and environmental problems, but it's kind of businesses that are balancing like purpose and profit. So it can be businesses that like make profit too. Like I know there's a pet food company that my friend works for called Lily's Kitchen. And it's just kind of, they're required to consider the impact of their decisions on like their workers and their customers and their suppliers and their community and the environment and things like that. I just wanted to clear that up. Oh,
no, thank you. Actually, that's funny. I've never actually heard of that. And I just Googled it, and lo and behold, there's this whole thing. So we'll link to that in the show notes too, because that's really interesting. And I'm going to have to learn a little bit more about that, apparently, so I don't stick my foot in my mouth next time someone brings that up. Thank you, Hayley. I appreciate that. Cool. All right. So now let's talk about Motion Hatch a little bit. So where did this come from?
Yeah, so I guess that idea like originally came from when I went freelance. I felt like there wasn't really anything around. Like I had to take my freelance friends to the pub and be like, hey, what are you charging? Like, how do you run your businesses? Things like that. And it was sort of like, I felt like it was like a big jigsaw trying to piece it all together. And I didn't really feel like there was anything out there that was particularly discussing the business side of things or like even like career side of things. Now there's obviously like a little bit more, but when I went freelance, like I think like 3 years ago or maybe a little bit more than that, there wasn't as much stuff around. So I sort of felt like, oh, someone should do that. But then I kind of forgot about it. And then, so I basically just carried on freelancing. And then I was thinking, oh, well, I'd like to do a bit more traveling, because I don't want to be one of those freelancers that just works all the time and is too scared to take a holiday, because I think that's really silly. And that's the power of being freelance. You know, you can just go, I'm going to take a month off. So that's what I did. And I went to
Good for you.
Thailand and Myanmar with my friend. And basically before that, I was thinking, I don't really know anything about traveling. Like I didn't do a gap year or anything like that. So I'm going to listen to some travel podcasts, because that's how I get my information, through podcasts. And so I found these two podcasts by these two guys. They were like two different travel podcasts. And it happened that they did a podcast together that was called Location Indie. And it was basically about running businesses and traveling. And so I was like, oh, I'm interested in that. That sounds good, you know. So I started listening to that, and then I joined their community. And it was just really, really helpful. Just they talked a lot about running businesses and being freelance and like online businesses, and then also like how to travel while working and all this kind of stuff. And I just thought, this is super interesting. Someone should do this for motion designers. So it like kept coming back, but I didn't really like make the connection for a while. And then I was sort of just, you know, it's not like you wake up one day and you go, yes, I will do this now. You just kind of, the ideas just start building up, and then you start speaking to different people and they're like, maybe I could be the person to do this. So yeah, I met another guy called Jeremy, who was a podcast editor, and he was traveling around the UK. And we met through like a location indie meetup. And he was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. I also edit this podcast that kind of does a similar thing, but like for wedding videos and stuff like that. You should listen to it. Maybe you should do a podcast. And I was like, I would do a podcast, but I hate my voice and probably everyone else will. It's that thing where imposter syndrome, it comes in like all the time.
Yep.
I can see it so much throughout my life. I'm like, oh, why don't you just like listen, just do it anyway. So anyway, I was like, thinking like, I can't do that. Like, no one's going to listen to it. How would I get on any guests on the show? Like, it would be horrible. But I couldn't really write very well, obviously, because we talked about all the dyslexia thing and things like that. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I have to do this because, I'm okay at talking. I'm sure I can do a podcast. It's like the other option. You're like, you have to write or you have to talk or you have to be on video. And I was like, okay, so podcasting seems like the least scary. So I'm going to do that.
That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah, that's literally how I thought about it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to just try and do that. So yeah, I launched with the podcast as being like the main thing. And because, Jeremy had like a podcasting, like he runs a podcasting company now, and he helped me like so much just build, decide like how many episodes to record and all this kind of stuff. So I guess it wouldn't be like a big thing if it wasn't for him kind of pushing me, and it's just really interesting because I think a lot of opportunities come from outside of the motion design industry and you don't really realize it. Like you can meet people and they can influence you. It's that same old thing that everyone always says, like, you're the average of the 5 people around you or something like that. And I think that it was definitely the case with this.
I love that. First of all, what you just said it rings really true to me because, a lot of the inspiration behind things that we do at School of Motion, they don't come from the motion design industry. They come from a million other places. But I didn't know that you sort of got a lot of these ideas from the, location independent community or the digital nomad community. Sometimes they're called. There's another really good podcast. You may have heard of it called Tropical MBA. Yeah. And that's what they talk about. And I used to listen to that when I was in my previous life as a creative director, and I would fantasize about having the ability to pick up and leave and have a business that can keep going even when I'm out of the country. And it's funny you bring that up because actually tomorrow I'm getting on an airplane and my family and I are going to Europe for 3 weeks. I now School of Motion can obviously sort of operate without me, but it can also be operated from a laptop anywhere in the world. Is that something that you're talking about through Motion Hatch and trying to, because it seems like motion designers are in a really good position to take advantage of that lifestyle. Get a powerful laptop and an internet connection, you can pretty much do motion design from any coffee shop in the world.
Yeah, definitely. I think I am trying to talk about that more because obviously I really like working remotely and I do that like for most of my clients now. And I just had someone on recently on the Motion Hatch podcast, Tom Davis, and he traveled around Europe for a bit doing this. And so we just released an episode about that actually. So yeah, it's definitely something that I think is worth exploring if you're interested in it. And I just really like the idea that, I think that more and more motion designers will be working remotely and there's less and less need for people to be kind of sat in a seat for like 8 hours a day and things like that. You can just, like you say, all you need is like a laptop and stuff. And then also we were talking about on the podcast how it can bring different opportunities because you can meet different people building different businesses like remotely, and then you can get more remote clients that way. Because if you're kind of, hanging out with all these people who are building remote businesses, hey, maybe they need some motion design,
Right. Everybody needs motion design now. It's true.
Exactly.
So I want to hear about what was your experience like when you started the podcast? Obviously, I'm sure it was scary and all of that, but was it difficult for you to book guests and to come up with questions and all that stuff? Was there any sort of surprising things you learned about the process?
One thing I will say, I'm really glad that I had an editor from the beginning, because I wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. Because not because of the skills, but because of time. Like, I'm still working pretty much as a full-time freelancer right now, and just trying to do Motion Hatch on the side, and having a bi-weekly podcast come out. It is really difficult. It's much tougher than people think, because you have to actually sit down. So we've done 21 or 22 episodes up to now, depends when this comes out, I think. But and that's I thought about the other day, that's 22 hours of me talking to people.
It's crazy, right?
That's crazy to think. You've done 52 or so, I don't know which one this will be, but you have to sit there for hours and hours and talk to people and explain things and stuff like that, and think of questions and reach out to people all the time. I'm emailing people, hey, do you want to be on the podcast, blah blah blah. And it can be quite tough, but I just live it now. I live talking to people, and it's just brought me so many opportunities that I think is awesome, being on this podcast. And you were on my podcast, and I remember when I first started, when I contacted you, Motion Hatch wasn't even in existence, I don't think. And I was like, oh, I really want to get Joey on the podcast, but he's not going to come on because no one knows who I am or what I'm doing. And then you were like, yeah, sure, I'll come on the podcast. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. You can just ask people and they'll come on your podcast. Yeah, so...
I know I have that same reaction all the time. And what's funny is that once you get a little bit of momentum and you have a few episodes out, it's pretty easy to get people to come on a podcast these days. But when you're starting out, I know exactly how you feel. It's well, why would they come on my podcast? No one's heard of me. But then the truth is that most people are way more than happy to come on and try to add value to a conversation. And so I know a lot of people listening have probably thought about starting a podcast. And even if it's not a motion design podcast, I would say give it a shot, because it's one of the most rewarding parts of my job. And I can tell by the way you talk about it, Hayley, that you really love it too. I want to hear also about your Facebook group, because you've got a very large Facebook group now for Motion Hatch. Where did the idea for that come from, and what is that Facebook group?
Yeah, so it's basically a community where people can go and ask business questions. We have 3 moderators and me now and there, because I want to try and keep it really, really focused on the business side of things, because obviously everyone's got different places and Facebook groups for everything else, and inspiration and stuff like that. So we're trying to be nope, this is the business one. You come here and you learn about, freelancing and careers and all this kind of stuff. And
none of this inspiration nonsense.
Yeah, don't come here for inspiration. No, that's fine. But we have different things. So we have Whip Wednesday, so you can post your work in there still, but it's quite structured. So Whip Wednesday, you post what you're working on for that week, and then Freelance Friday, you can say what your wins of the week are, and we kind of just support each other. And I guess how it started was because I was chatting to one of the Location Indie guys. See, there's a theme here. Mm-hmm. And he was I was oh, I just don't know how to start. I don't know where to start. I don't know what should be the first thing that I put out, blah, blah, blah. And I knew that I kind of wanted to build a community, but I think I was thinking of all these crazy things that I could do, build a forum or build a whole website with a community and stuff like that. But then I just thought, he was just just start small, just do a Facebook group and invite people to join it. And I was okay, yeah. Well, it's something so simple, but it makes so much sense. And then now it's just growing really big. It's crazy. I think there's nearly 3,000 people in there. It's quite a lot.
That's amazing. Well, and hopefully, when this episode comes out, you'll get a bunch more in there because it's free to join, right? You just have to apply and get accepted.
Yeah. Basically, you just answer some questions. I think they're basically are you a motion designer?
Right.
There might be a couple more, but yeah, if you're listening to this, I think you're definitely qualified to join the Motion Hatch community.
That's awesome. So Motion Hatch is really focused, and I love that even the Facebook group, you've sort of moderated it in a way. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Whip Wednesday. That is genius. I really like that. Yeah. So it's really focused on the business side of things. And I'm guessing that the reason that that's the case is because of experiences you had maybe when you went freelance, and challenges you faced. So I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the business challenges that you had to overcome that now you're hoping to help other artists through.
Yeah, well, there's like so many, right? I think some of the things are like, should I get an accountant? Where do I get an accountant? Like all this stuff like comes up all the time. And it's definitely things that I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was like, do I need an accountant? Do I have to set up as a limited company? Or like, I know in the US it's like LLC, but like they're basically the similar stuff. So
Yep.
yeah, and like it was just all these questions that I didn't know answers to. And like I said before, I just had to ask my freelance friends and things like should I get like insurance for my business and stuff like that. This stuff comes up in the group all the time, and it's really, really handy because if I can't answer it, then somebody else can. And I think it's definitely all the same things that I went through, and now we're just trying to put it in one place basically where it's easy for people to access it. And there's also people from all around the world, so it's not like it's just really UK focused because I'm running it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, actually, because you've got a worldwide audience, and I'm not in that Facebook group, but I'm assuming that you've got, a lot of different countries represented there, and they all have different laws and tax codes and things like that. Do you find that creates any issues with, in the UK, do it this way, but in Poland, don't do it that way because it's against the law or something like that?
Most of the stuff is kind of the same because most of the stuff is pricing and stuff like that. But that in itself is a bit tricky because obviously you have different prices everywhere. But I'll say one thing for the community is good because there is like loads of people from everywhere in it, right? So like, yeah, like if I don't know, somebody else is going to know, or, we can help find out basically, because it's like the same things come up, like insurance, accounting, pricing, like how to get clients, things like that. Some of the stuff is universal, but then some of it is more like in that country. But then I just encourage people to like say in the Facebook group, like, hey, is anyone from so and so place, like I need help with this? And usually there's somebody else who's gone through that same thing, and they're like more than happy to help. I'm pretty happy about the group because it's really engaged and everyone like really does want to help, and every post has like a lot of answers on it, and people are trying to like jump at the chance to help each other, which is really nice because I know that some groups are very like, here's my work, here's my work, here's my work, and
right.
Not much else. So I'm really happy about that.
Well, that's a testament to, I think Facebook groups and even sort of online message boards of any kind, they sort of take on a little bit of the personality of the person that started it. And I think that's a testament to you. You obviously want to help people. You've created this amazing resource. It sounds incredible. It's definitely something I wish had existed when I first went freelance. That would have been very, very handy. So you talked about some of the, some of the questions that you brought up that your audience has, should I get an accountant? Where do I find one? Those, to me, those are sort of the smaller, easier things to pick off. But what are some of the big things that you really want to help your community with? Some of the things that, not having an accountant's bad. You should have one, but you can probably get by without one for a couple of years, use TurboTax or something like that, right? But there's some things that will cripple you if you don't do them right. I'm curious if there's anything like that you focus on.
Yeah, I think it's stuff like the big things are probably like not starting to charge like high enough when you start out and things like that. Because I think, if you say, you're a new freelancer and you're like, hey, but I'm new, so I should just charge like, not very much, like $200 or something. I'm trying to think of like a low number. But,
right.
But if you do that, then it's going to be like really hard to raise your rate later on, like to something that you'd actually want to charge. So I think there's big like mistakes like that people make, that where it's good to kind of start out and like come in the group and say, hey, like I was thinking about this. Do you think that sounds about right? And stuff like that. Because, I think people want to help each other. And I'm always trying to like push everyone to like raise their prices, or at least start their ask high, right? Because we know that everyone's always going to negotiate you down, so you may as well start higher than you think, because then they're probably going to negotiate down to something that you're more happy with. So that's kind of a biggie, but it's a tough one. Like that's probably the hardest thing to solve, right? That's the biggest thing that I want to solve, but I think it's really hard, because the problem is everyone charges different things in different countries, and obviously, you can't really say like, oh, this is the one rate,
Yeah. So have you noticed, I mean, obviously, the rate in, like the Philippines or something is going to be different than the rate in San Francisco. But are there any sort of general guidelines that you tell new artists? I mean, and I guess to make it a little bit easier to answer, we could say in places where there is sort of a motion design industry, at this point, I think most countries have like some form of a motion design industry, but obviously you've still got the major markets, in the US, Canada, and then a lot of European countries and a lot of the bigger Asian countries. Are there any trends you've seen or places to start for our listeners who aren't sure what they should be charging?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing to do is like think about how much you need to make to survive, if that makes sense. And it's like even more than that, because I know in the US you have like healthcare and taxes and everything like that. So you can't just say like, oh, when I was full time, I was earning this much of my salary, so I'll just like divide that by, how many days in the year and then charge that. Like, yeah, that's not going to work. So don't do that. I would say like try and ask the people around you, like if you can get into different communities like Motion Hatch or like locally as well, that's really good. But then I think I just challenge people to like ask for a little bit more than they think is the general thing that I go with, because I always think that, when I always have like, this is my day rate, and then I have like, I ask for that, and then like have like a middle rate where I'm like, okay, I'm happy if I get that right. And then I have like my lowest rate where I'm like, if they go below that, I'm just going to say no. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. You know what I mean? And then you judge it on like who they are as well.
Right.
It's like, who's the company, things like that. And you kind of I just like fluctuate between those rates. But then I definitely have like a bottom one where I'm like, no matter what, I'm not going to go below that. And then it makes it really, really easy to negotiate with people about rates, because you're really clear in your mind, what you want out of it.
I love that. It's almost like you can take the approach of, well, these are the rules and I'm just following the rules, so I have to say no. Yeah.
That's what I set out as in my head, because what I used to get into trouble with is like, when I was working full time and stuff, when I was younger, I used to, you go into your like appraisal or whatever, and you just think, okay, I'll wait for them to tell me like if I deserve a pay rise or whatever like that. But then I started thinking about it in the way of like, how much value am I providing to the company, and how can I let them know that I'm doing that so they can see that I deserve a pay rise or a promotion, rather than thinking of it from a like, I just want to get a pay rise. You're sort of thinking it in the way of like, from the company's perspective, not like making it really personal. It's more like, how am I helping them? Usually like, how am I helping them make money? So then therefore I should be like getting part of that back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And especially when you're on staff, I think it's good to realize that, if you get a $4,000 a year pay raise, well, to you, that might be a lot of money, $4,000 is a lot, but to the company, that would be a rounding error on their, like if they're billing millions of dollars a year. So, that doesn't mean they'll always give you the raise, but it can help with that sort of guilty feeling that I think a lot of artists feel, especially when you get more experienced and you get further in your career, especially if you're freelance, you can start charging dollar amounts that might feel, in some cases, they may almost feel excessive. I'm curious if you have any advice for people who have that little voice in their head saying, you're being greedy here, you're charging too much, like, even though you might be able to charge, say a Google or a big company like that, a really high rate.
Yeah, so I think that comes back to the thing of like, you have to look at the company, right? I'm not saying you should just go around charging like excessive amounts to like every like little business. You know what I mean? I think it's like you have to, this is a problem with this kind of thing. It's like very situation to situation based.
Right.
But then you kind of, that's why I think it's good to have these general rules around how much you're charging. And then it's more easy for you when you get a new client to go, okay, well, normally I charge this, but actually I know that they're like, I don't know, like a charity or something. Not that sometimes charities have like really big budgets, so don't get caught out by that. But sometimes they don't, right? So like then you say, okay, I know they're a charity and they just want this little thing. And so maybe I'll charge like my kind of lower rate that I wouldn't normally charge like a big company like Nike or something, if that makes sense.
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's, I would always say, I wouldn't feel guilty because you're making money, you're like running a business. That's why I think it's good to think about these things of like, I'm running a business, this is my business. It's not like a personal thing. Like it's personal in the way that I'm always going to do the best for my clients and things like that, you know, and try and like make the best animation possible for them. But it's not personal in the way as like, you know, I'm doing this because I want to be an animator and I want to survive being an animator and I don't want to be a starving artist. So I have to charge, this is what I have to charge to do that.
That's a really good way of looking at it. And I think, you know, trying to separate the money, trying to think of how to put this, like, you know, when you think of your work as a business, money comes in and you have to kind of play this mental trick with yourself where it's like, well, it's not my money. That's the business's money. And that business, it's almost like the lifeblood of that business, right? It needs the money to survive, to pay me to keep working, but also to, you know, pay for like, you know, classes and spec projects and things like that will improve the work you're able to do for your clients. And so it's not just about being paid the correct amount for your time. It's about being paid enough so you can invest back into your business, even if it's just you freelancing. I think that's a really smart way to look at it. And it's the only way that you'll really be able to grow your business.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, you know, really true what you're saying. And it's like, it's just that thing of, you know, we're running businesses. We have to, otherwise you're not going to be able to do it anymore. I'm just trying to get away from this idea that like, oh, you know, we're animators, we're making creative things. It's really fun. You know, I don't deserve to be paid for it or whatever, or I just deserve this like little amount. I'm not going to try and like see how I can progress it, because at the end of the day, I think if you can build yourself like good small business that you're proud of and that you make good work, and especially like, you know, I'm really trying to work towards the things I was talking about, like working more with clients, you know, who are having a positive impact on the world and things like that. You know, that can be really beneficial for you and like lots of other people too, and like for your families and things like that. So, and you can do more traveling and, you know, all sorts of things. So I think it's really important to think about it in the way of, it's not just about the money, really, like you were saying. It's about all the things around it and like how building a good business can help you do other things.
I love it. The business is the platform, and that's all it is. So let's talk about the business, because you actually just launched recently your first product. And I'm really curious about it. I don't know too much about it. I know that it's a freelance contract bundle. So can you just kind of give us some background on it? What is this this contract bundle?
Yeah, so it's basically 2 contract templates that I made especially for motion designers. One's a commission contract, which is, you know, more for direct client project fee type work. So it includes things like a scope of work and like terms and conditions. And then the other one is a terms of service contract. That's what we've called it. But it's basically like a kind of day rate when you go into an agency or an animation studio kind of contract. And that has like terms and conditions, but then it doesn't really have like a big scope of work like the other one does, but it has like a mini scope of work at the end, which basically just says, I'm going to start work on this date and I'm going to finish on this date, and this is what I'm going to do. And that's because it relates to all the terms and conditions in there, which are things like cancellation fees and, you know, like assigning intellectual property and like payment and project files, like assigning the project files or not and things like that. So
perfect. Well, I mean, that's definitely something that, the average motion designer isn't going to want to create on their own.
No.
Even describing it, I was sort of like, oh, legalese. So what was the motivation to create this, this contract bundle as your first product? Because I know that you've probably got a lot of ideas of ways you could help your community, but why contracts?
Because I think it's the hardest thing, which I think is probably not a great decision on my behalf, is to start with the hardest thing. But it's just how
get it out of the way.
Yeah, just get out of the way. So I recorded a podcast episode with Sylvia Baumgart. She's a solicitor in the UK who used to be the general manager at the Association of Illustrators, and she also did an intellectual property program at the University of Arts London. So she knows tons and tons about all this stuff. And we spoke about different resources for motion designers in the UK in terms of law and contracts and things like that. And we were saying, like, the AOI have got like loads of great resources for illustrators and it's really good, but it's not really made for animators as such. So, we were saying, yeah, maybe you could go there on the podcast and stuff like that. And just afterwards, I was like, hey, Sylvia, why don't we, make a contract template for motion designers? Like, it just made sense to me to kind of do that, really, because if, obviously the Association of Illustrators is great, but it's not really for animators as such, and
right.
There's kind of different nuances and stuff to consider. So I asked her if she would help me do that, and she said yes. So it was really great. So yeah, we made the UK one, and that was really awesome.
Cool. And so, obviously, a really big portion of our audience is in the US. And by the time this episode drops, the US version of this contract bundle may already be live. So make sure you go to Motion Hatch and check. But Hayley, what was the process like for you to take that UK contract and create a version that will work for US-based artists?
Yeah, so basically what I did was I created the UK one, and then we did a little pre-launch, like a pre-sale thing, where we sold the UK one and we kind of pre-sold the US one. So then I took that money from the pre-launch and gave it to the US lawyer. So we're working with the US lawyer now, kind of as we speak, on the US version to create that for everyone. So it's like everyone who kind of got the pre-sale will get it, but then it'll also we'll do like a relaunch of the UK and the US one, which I think by the time this goes out will already be online and everything. So I was going to say, if everyone goes to motionhatch.com/SOM, like SOM for School of Motion, then I'm going to put everything there once I know, what's going on. So you can go there and find out exactly where all this stuff is.
Perfect. Okay. And we'll link to that in the show notes as well. So thank you for doing that. And are you going to kind of see how this goes and then potentially, would you think about doing other countries as well?
Yeah, I've had a few questions about, I think mainly the ones that are popping up are like Canada, because even though I think it's kind of similar to the US, there are differences. And I spoke to the US lawyer about that. And she said that it's quite similar, but it's recommended to have a Canadian lawyer. So then we'd hire a Canadian lawyer to do that. And then Australia as well as another potential one. But I think at the moment, I'm just going to see how the US and the UK ones go. I would say that I think that you could get the UK or the US one if you're in a different country kind of as a good starting point, and then take it to a lawyer in your country. But you'd have to do that because obviously all the laws are different in different countries. But it's definitely a good starting point because, mainly the things that motion designers are concerned about is going to be similar stuff like cancellation fees and payment schedules and assigning intellectual property and getting paid for project files and things like that. So that's all in there. So I think it's a good kicking off point, but you'd have to take it to a lawyer in your own country.
That's awesome. And I love the way you sort of kickstarted the US version by pre-selling it, which is really, really smart. I always love when, I see this intersection of entrepreneurship and motion design. And I think it's really, really cool what you're doing. So you've got this one product that's come out and it seems super duper useful and helpful. You've got amazing Facebook community that's now moderated. You've got your podcast. What is your vision for Motion Hatch? What would you like to see it turn into?
I think I just want it to be the place for motion designers to go, like for everything to do with the business side of things and careers. And I kind of want to defeat the idea of the starving artist, like I said earlier, and, go more into universities or schools and talk about, how to get into motion design and things like that, and more speaking around the business side of things. But I think really it's about the community and having different meetups all around the world, and then having more people supporting each other. So whether that's online or meeting up in real life as well. I mean, there's so much, I just imagine it to be this big thing where you can go and it's kind of all there, and you don't have to do what I do. And when I was first going freelance and kind of jigsaw it all together, and then you're asking people and you're not sure if they really have the right answers, Right. I just really want it to be a one-stop shop, motion design business.
Right. You're saving new artists a lot of pain by sort of teaching them this stuff without them having to learn it the hard way. And I think that's a really amazing mission. And I know, I only hear good things about Motion Hatch and about you, and I'm not surprised to see the success, and I know you're going to have more. So my last question is, do you see yourself doing this? Are you trying to turn this into your full-time job, or do you still see yourself doing a mix of client work and this sort of, community building and teaching?
Yeah, so I really love doing my client work. It's really fun too. But I think the problem is, at the moment, I feel like I have 2 full-time jobs. So I can definitely see that in the future, it would probably be beneficial for Motion Hatch to be able to do it full-time and build a sustainable business out of it, because then I can, hopefully provide more, value and more services to people, and, build up doing more podcasts and more courses and things like that. I mean, it's just under a year old now, so I feel like it's just getting started. But yeah, I feel like eventually maybe I would like to do it full time, because of the fact of that I know that I can do more stuff if I do it full time, right? And the other day I spoke to someone on a call from the community, and she was just about to go freelance, and she was asking me about the contract bundle and things like that. And I just felt like I kind of looked at her and I was like, wow, that was me, it was such a really weird, surreal thing. I'd kind of morphed back into myself when I was in that position. I felt like I would just have loved to have something like Motion Hatch available at that time. And I think it made me really emotional, because I thought I thought I still was that person, but now I'm a different person and I've learned loads of things. So it's really, really nice to try and give some of that back and just do as much as I can, really. I think at the end of the day, it's not about what I want Motion Hatch to be and things like that. It's really about what the community wants. And I'm always trying to listen to what the motion design community wants from something like this, and just try and help that way, really.
I want to thank Hayley so much for coming on. She's quickly becoming a role model for young artists in the industry, and I think her attitude, ambition, and super friendly personality have a lot to do with Motion Hatch's success. Make sure you check out Motion Hatch and the newly released Freelance Contract Bundle, and everything we talked about in this episode will be linked in the show notes at schoolofmotion.com. And while you're there, why not sign up for Motion Mondays? Geez, this episode has a lot of alliteration. Whip Wednesdays, Freelance Fridays, and now Motion Mondays. Well, Motion Mondays is a short email that we send out at the beginning of each week to keep you up to date on any news, events, tools, or work that's come out, so you can be in the know. You can read it in a minute, and then you can just get on with your day and impress your friends with your astounding knowledge of the industry. Right. So to get the email, just sign up for a free account at schoolofmotion.com, and the newsletter and so much more can be yours. That is it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a lovely day.